Coming up on today's episode of the Salesman Podcast.
Yeah, it is, because if you don't get that right, you're not going to get anything right.
Hello, Sales Nation, and welcome to today's episode of the Salesman Podcast. I'm your host, Will Barron, as always, and welcome to today's show. On today's show, we have Mark Hunter, author of High Profit Prospecting, and that is exactly what we're talking about today. Mark gives a whole bunch of tips. He's discussing why prospecting is just essentially the most important task that you have as a salesperson and how to improve upon it. You can find out more about Mark over at thesaleshunter.com. And with that all said, let's jump into today's show. Hi, Mark, and welcome to the Salesman Podcast.
Hey, thank you for having me on today.
You are more than welcome, sir. You've given me a lot of value in just the conversation that we have before we click record, so I'm sure there's a lot more that the audience is going to get out of this show as we get into it. And the first question I want to ask Mark is prospecting, because that's what I want to talk about today, that's going to be the topic of the show, is prospecting the most difficult part of the sales process?
Yeah, it is, because if you don't get that right, you're not going to get anything right. Let me give you a quick example. The reason too many people can't prospect, well, it's not that they can't prospect. They wind up just getting people with heartbeats. Well, let me tell you something. My dog has got a heartbeat, but my dog is never going to buy from me. You see, the big challenge is it's not just prospecting, but it's prospecting with the right prospect, the prospect that you can close at full price without a discount.
So I don't want to dive into the world of cold calling's dead, cold calling isn't dead, cold emailing works, social media, social selling. I want to avoid that the best we can, and I want to talk more tactically about what you just alluded to then, of how do we know someone is a good prospect, how do we know that the kind of time frames and things of that nature. And I guess we'll start with that, Mark. Is a lot of these questions that we all have, and a lot of the stuff that we have to input into a CRM, the software spits out information the other end that potentially helps us. Is a lot of this based around just asking the prospect those questions?
Yeah, you got to be willing to ask these questions early on. Here's the thing that I've found with a lot of salespeople. They sit there and say, oh, I got to fill my funnel. I have this. Well, you know what they wind up with is nothing more than a parking lot. They have all these names in their CRM system, and they're not going anywhere. In fact, it's a parking lot full of cars that don't even have engines in them. I mean, they're not even there. The challenge people have with prospecting is it's not the quantity of the names. It's the quality of the names. There's an example I like to use along with a parking lot example is I don't want to have a big fat funnel. I don't want to have this big fat sales pipeline. That's a sewer pipe. What I want to have is a water tap where prospects are moving through quickly. That's how I'm going to be the most efficient with my time. Because really my goal is to spend more time with fewer prospects. Think about that for a moment. Wait a minute. More time with fewer prospects. Yeah. That totally runs the opposite of what so many sales managers are beating up their people over. Get more prospects. No. Get better.
And from
prospects.
the sales manager perspective, why do they want to? Because I've been in this situation a whole ton of times where you're force feeding these prospects down your funnel. You know a lot of them aren't going to close. You know a lot of them are just names, just heartbeats. I like the way you described that. But they make your sales manager happy, which then makes your life easier. Why does the sales manager? Why are they pushing for seemingly just random names thrown in the beginning of this funnel?
Because somebody up above them is pushing the sales manager. Get more names. Because we've become a victim of this whole game of it's just names, it's just numbers, get big numbers. And that doesn't put food on the table. And so many times what we have happening is that we have people up on top of the food chain that have no clue what sales is. They are petrified of sales. But they just feel that, well, if we just get enough numbers in there, something good is going to happen. And salespeople, as a result, well, if I'm just on the hamster wheel and the hamster wheel's turning fast, something's going to happen. No, you're going to get very tired. I think it's without a doubt the reason we have such turnover in sales and the reason why so many people are turned off to sales because prospecting. I don't want to prospect because it's all this.
Is there a number or a point in your brain and the way your brain works where you can only deal with so many ongoing conversations at once, whether that be 5 people that you're building relationships with or 10 versus of course you couldn't deal with 100 people that you're emailing all at once?
Well, it does. And the size of the brain really depends upon your sales cycle. Let me give you an example. You might be selling something that is a very short sales cycle. So you're moving prospects through very, very quickly. Okay. So in that regard, you may not have many prospects in there, but they're coming through quickly. You may have something that's a very long sales cycle. It may be, I've worked with companies where there's a 2 and 3 year sales cycle. Reason because it's got to get spec'd, it's got to get engineered, it's got to get tested, all those sort of things. So you may wind up with a lot more prospects in there just because, in order to get 1 or 2 dropping through every month, I may have to have a couple hundred in there. So it really depends upon your process. The key is not the size of your brain. The key is the methodology and the process that you're using to move people through.
Okay, well, let's get real practical with this. For the salesperson listening now, they're a B2B salesperson, say they're selling software sales, whatever it is. Or let's use my background, medical devices, perhaps. Which should they, going out of this episode, when they go back into the office, they finish their commute, what should they focus on? Should they focus, and they can only focus on one for the sake of time of this episode, should they focus on the quality of the leads coming in or how fast they can move them down the funnel? Which is the most important thing to optimize?
I'm going to focus on how fast they can move them through because here's the whole thing. I see too many salespeople making this mistake. They fail to follow up. They simply fail to follow up. And this is because they got too many leads on their plate. And as a result, stuff just falls off. So what I like to do is I like to look to move people through quickly. If I move people through quickly, I stay more engaged and the prospect stays more engaged. Let me give you a classic example. And we've all had this situation. You might be prospecting somebody and wow, I know they're going to buy it. Well, let me tell you something. You're thinking about them, but they're not thinking about you. And have you ever called somebody up and you introduce yourself and, hey, I'm Mark Hunter, and you hear this? Because nothing clicks. But the prospect that you've been engaged with a lot, you call them up and, oh yeah, hey Mark, how you doing? Yeah, boom. You see, we both win, both us and the customer. Because keep in mind this, nobody buys anything. They invest. They only invest. My whole objective is to help you, and this is true in a B2B or B2C and even in B2G, business to government. It really is about taking and saying, what is this time worth? If we delay this decision, what is that worth to you? Because time has money equated to it. So the way I speed up my prospecting process is I want you, the prospect, to understand that you delaying this decision, you failing to engage with me is only going to hurt you down the road. Because really, what am I doing from a prospecting? I'm prospecting to qualify you to know if you go into my sales process. If I do a good job of prospecting and really get the need uncovered, the sales process goes very, very quickly, and I can move you to that closed state. Yes, I love it.
How do we find this balance between being super pushy, which is a turn off, which is something that people will resent and push back from, versus you are genuinely moving things forward because it's the best thing to do in the situation? Where is that balance and how do you find it?
Well, that is a tough question to answer, but let me give you the secret sauce. You first have to realize that the most valuable asset you have is your time. It's not what you sell. It's not your price point. It's not the outcomes you deliver. It's not the customers you have. It's your time. Your time. You have to realize that your failure to use that time in the most efficient manner hurts you the most. I just read something interesting. I happen to live in Omaha, Nebraska, a home of Warren Buffett, third richest guy in the world. Just found out that he has made $2 million every day of his life. $2 million. Now think about that. That means something's going right. he has really learned how to leverage his time. So I do want to push you a little bit. I'm going to push you a little bit because you know what? Otherwise, you're going to wind up in this parking lot, in this sales funnel parking lot. You're going to become in this sales sewer line. So I want to either get you on board or get you off board quickly. Nice doesn't feed my kids. Now, that's being a little bit harsh, okay? And I get that. But sometimes I got to push salespeople to get them to realize that don't think that you're interfering. Don't think that you're being a pest. Because you know what? Do you believe in what you can deliver? Do you believe in the outcome that you can help that customer with? And didn't we say earlier that time has money equated to it? So guess what? It's to your advantage to get that customer to buy as soon as possible because that's how they're going to benefit from their outcome. Okay, I'm getting a little wound up here, but I do get a little passionate about it.
Good. And how do we do this practically with the customer? So I'm on board with the kind of motivational aspects of getting the salesperson, the person listening, myself, to get their finger out and start hustling a bit further and harder. But how does that translate to the prospect? What kind of questions perhaps do we have to ask them to put time to make them feel that time is as important as what it is in their own mind?
Yeah, okay. It's not what you're selling. What you're selling is totally irrelevant. What you're selling is probably no different than what everyone else is selling. It's the outcome that you're going to create. Your key, and believe me, you are only a suspect until you have revealed to me a piece of proprietary information. Now, what do I mean by this? Think about this for a moment. If I was selling to you and I think that you're a suspect, Will, you would not move to my prospect. You would not move to my prospect list until you've told me one piece of information that you deem as proprietary. That's something that's not known publicly. Now think about this for a moment. You would not choose to do that unless you had a level of confidence and competence in me. You see, now think about that for a moment. Too many salespeople have leads and what they think are prospects, but ask the customer, ask that person, are you a prospect? No, they just sent me some information. You see, you're not a prospect until there's a level of confidence and competence. Then when you've shared with me a piece of proprietary information, now I can begin to equate that to an outcome and putting time on it. Because there's four critical factors that I've got to understand. Now, believe me, these have been talked about for years and years and years. Nothing new here. But what I think is new here is the fact that we don't do it as a salesperson. A, I want to find out what is the outcome. And that outcome is going to come from that piece of proprietary knowledge. B, what is your timeline for making a decision? My whole goal is to accelerate that timeline as rapidly as possible. C, I want to make sure, are you the decision maker? Okay, now that only makes sense, but how many times have we been dealing with what we think is a prospect, and suddenly we get down to trying to close the deal, and they go, well, we got to talk to somebody else. Well, that didn't work out so well. And the final thing is, what's your value of money? What is your value of money? This is so critical because I'll tell you what, in the United States, we've got two really good chains, Walmart stores and Nordstrom stores. Walmart, of course, appeals to virtually the free world, everybody. And Nordstrom is very upscale. Well, here's the problem. I can't take a Walmart shopper and make them a Nordstrom customer. It's not going to happen. But the Walmart shopper may walk into the Nordstrom store, but they're not going to buy. You see, they're not going to buy because their value of money is different. See, this is the piece that I think most salespeople leave out. And I want to uncover this in the prospecting phase. I don't like uncovering this in the negotiating phase because once I get to the negotiating phase, we're playing games, you see. When I'm in the prospecting phase, we're more relaxed, we're calm. I get truth out of you. This is why I say when I take prospecting and elevate it and make it a much more critical role, I move people through the selling funnel and I move people through to the close that much faster.
What would you ask a prospect to suss out what they value money-wise?
Well, what I would ask them is I say, How have you made decisions like this in the past? Yeah, and this is going to tell me a couple things. A, this is going to help me answer what's the process they go through? Are there other people? This is going to help me understand, how do they look at money? Oh, well, we compared this, and this. And think about it. Most B2B companies have a very methodical process in terms of how they, and I don't want to use the word buy, invest. What I want to do is I want to uncover what that methodical process is, because the more I can fit into their methodical process, the less friction I'm going to encounter. And I want to get that out of the way early on. I want to get that on the table in the prospecting phase.
Mark, let me take this on a slightly different angle, because I think this is going to be, it's probably less talked about, but it's going to be just as useful and just as practical for the audience as well. What do you do when someone doesn't divulge this information? In most companies, they're probably just still sat in a pipeline 5 years later, just at the top of the funnel. Where should they go? When should we follow back up with them? Should we follow back up with them at all? Or should we be just focusing on the few customers that are coming through fast? How do we re-engage them? I've thrown a lot at you there, but quite an open-ended question of what do we do with those people when they don't give up this proprietary information?
Don't waste your time on them. Move them over to your marketing list. Move them over to some other list. You're still going to be in touch with them by way of email, by way of other things, but don't use your precious sales, your prospecting cycles, your time. We wind up wasting way too much time chasing dead horses. They're not going anywhere. So move them over somewhere else. This again comes back to, I want to spend more time with fewer prospects. The faster I get those people, this is why I want a fast no. If you tell me, I may be selling medical devices, okay, just, like the industry you came out of, and there may be a contract, fine, great, your contract's not up for a couple years, or that's what this surgeon absolutely, the surgeon is absolutely married to this particular company, fine, good to know. I'm going to move you over to my marketing, and I'm not going to come back to you until I feel like I've got some sort of viable option. Because again, I could just sit there and just pound my head against the wall. And you know what? After a while, you get a big headache. And that's why we have turnover with salespeople.
And do we not do this as salespeople, perhaps because of our egos? We feel like we should be able to close, or we're told we should be able to close anybody. If you're a good salesperson, that's what you should be able to do.
Yeah, you just hit it right. You hit it right on the head. It's our own self-optimism. And we've been told, you can close this, you can close this, you can close this, you can close this. Well, excuse me. If you say that I can close it, why don't you go close it, okay? Why don't you go close it? It's okay. It's okay to move somebody off the plate. It's very funny. If you take a look, and I mentioned the name Warren Buffett earlier, he made $2 million, terrific investor. If you were to ask him, he has made a tremendous number of failed investments in his lifetime, huge failures. But it's okay. It's okay. You move on. You move on. So there may be ones that you do miss out on. It's okay. Warren Buffett's done pretty good with what he's made his money in. So my goal is this. I want to find those leads. I want to capture, I want to get those prospects. I want to put them into that water pipeline, that drinking fountain, that boom, I can pull them through quickly.
And Warren Buffett's probably a good example for this from another angle as well, in that from what I've read about him, he's very cautious and has a very specific stepped process of the deals he does do, even though, obviously some of them fail, some of them do super well. He's invested in huge brands that he would have got huge long-term investments as well. That he's invested in will probably never come out of them until he dies and someone takes over his holdings and ruins the whole thing that he's got going. Is that how we should look at? Obviously, it depends on the industry, but is that how we should look at our customers as well? Should we prioritize the ones that are going to turn into bigger accounts over time, even though it's perhaps a bit more effort up front?
Yes, because again, let's stay with Warren Buffett. Wow, we're turning into an investment podcast here. I love it. But anyway, but here's something very interesting about Warren. He has a tremendous amount of background knowledge. Okay, so he knows what prospects may be the ones to chase after, the deals. And when a deal comes onto his radar screen, he's known to close that deal very quickly. You see what he's doing? He's only chasing a few deals at a time, but he moves them through quickly. Wow, that's kind of brilliant. Maybe I should be doing the same thing from a prospecting standpoint with regards to sales. You see, so he knows what he's looking at. See, he's done a very good job of knowing what fits his portfolio. See, this again is his problem. I got to know, who is my dream customer? What does my dream customer look like? So Warren knows what that is. So what does that do? That means when something comes up on his radar screen that fits that profile, he can move them through very quickly. He's been known to really complete deals in just a couple of days. Boom, done. Wow, unbelievable. And I sit here and agonize over buying a new car. He's dropping billions of dollars, no problem. Wow.
Well, sure. I'm sure it's all relative, though. I can't remember the statistic, but it was something, and I'm sure the audience, because I get this every time I ad hoc do maths, but it was something along the lines of, if you're a billionaire, a Ferrari is the equivalent to someone who's earning an average wage in the US of about 45 cents or something like that. And that's and that puts it all in perspective from the amount of money that those guys have got. But you mentioned something then, which I think is super relevant. It's super, hopefully practical, your advice on this, Mark. And we'll wrap up this part of the show with this question of, how do we know who our dream customers are? It seems like a simple kind of thing to know, and every salesperson should know it. But I think a lot of the audience listening, if they really put their mind to it, they probably don't have that avatar down to a T.
Oh, I think you are spot on there. We don't know. Here's what you want to do. You want to sit there and say, okay, what is the profile of my dream customer? Now, where this comes to is, don't look at it from a demographic or a psychographic or anything like that. Look at it from an outcome standpoint. What was the outcome they were trying to achieve? And how well did they achieve that outcome? That's what you're looking for. Because now what you can say is, you can say, okay, what I want to do is I want to find prospects. I want to find leads that potentially have the same outcome that they're looking for. That's the type of person I want to be going after. That's the type of company I want to be going after. Now,
what's an example of that, Mark?
Okay, for instance, you may be a business, and we'll say it's software. Okay, well, no, let's go ahead and stay in medical devices. Okay, so this may be a single hospital, or it may be a hospital group. Okay, and if you say, well, gee, we sell to big groups, you could be missing out on a lot of single hospitals. But really what it comes down to is the chief surgeon. If the chief surgeon uses a very unique type of operating procedure, recommends, and this is what they do in their surgery suites, then that says, that's the profile I want to go after. Now, I do need to know the demographic, the psychographic, and all that sort of piece, because again, let's stay with medical devices. The single hospital is going to take a different sales process than the hospital group, because the hospital group undoubtedly has got a bigger purchasing department, has got, vetting processes and so forth. So their buying cycle is undoubtedly going to be longer. The touch points I'm going to need is going to be longer. The single hospital might be that I just need to get a meeting with that chief surgeon. I may need to get just a meeting with a couple of the surgeons who do the majority of their work at that hospital. See, so the process is going to be different, but the outcome is the same. Now, this is one of the critical pieces. Good salespeople have multiple processes. You may have 6 or 7 or 8 different processes, prospecting processes, because you're selling into different demographic groups, but all looking for that same outcome.
So is it fair to say then, to wrap up this part of the show, Mark, that we should have, and there might be perhaps different outcomes for different products depending on services and what we're selling, but for example, we should be not focusing on a hospital that has X budget and so many surgeons and yada yada and all the different variables. We should be searching for a hospital that is looking to reduce the theatre operating times. That's the outcome our product can help solve and leverage and move towards that outcome. Is that what we should be focusing on with our top of funnel activities? Exactly,
because if that's their outcome, see, now I can work back. And that's the piece that I think, because we naturally gravitate towards the demographics. We naturally, the size of the hospital, the potential, whatever. And yeah, I want to go after big gain, yeah. But boy, many times there's easy sales that we pass up when we get too focused on, the size of the company, whatever.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I've never approached it this way before. Perhaps I've done it inadvertently, and I found out after the fact that that's what they were going for, and that fit to everything else that I was selling. But looking at it that way is a totally different way of going about it, because I think you would go demographic usually because you can see it from the outside, whereas probably the outcome you have to ask the question. So you can be a lot more lazy about what you've thrown in the funnel. I love this, Mark. It's all coming together.
I love it. But that to me right there, that changes the ball game completely. I mean, that changes everything so dramatically in terms of what we need to be chasing after.
Definitely.
And I think we would look at prospecting completely different.
Well, I think we need to, and I think the audience moving forward from the show will. And with that, Mark, I've got a couple of questions to ask everyone that comes on the show. First one, dollar size if possible. What's the biggest deal you've ever closed?
Wow, I spend a lot of time in consumer packaged goods, so really the largest deal was probably in the neighborhood of $30 or $40 million. Just because I did at one time sell to Walmart. Oh man, that's a lesson in humility, but we'll save that for a different episode.
Good stuff. Mark, next one. What is one book or resource other than your own, which I'll come on to in a minute, that you'd recommend to the Salesman Podcast audience?
Hey, New Sales Simplified, Mike Weinberg. He wrote the introduction to my book, and Mike and I have been good friends for years, but I'll tell you what, that book, he just knocks it out of the ballpark. New Sales Simplified, because you'll read his book and you'll find yourself standing naked because he strips you down bare with his frank talk.
Good stuff. We had Mike on the show, and then he continued talking to me for about an hour afterwards about Porsches. So he was a good guy.
He is a Porsche fanatic. Go out to his website. He's got some pictures. I asked him, I said, when did you buy the Porsche? He said, I didn't. I borrowed it for the photo shoot. I said, dude, you're killing me.
Amazing. Next one. Who is the world's greatest salesperson?
Well, myself, because I sold a proposition to my wife to marry me. And if you've ever met her, I married way above my... No, hey, we'll get off that. I would say Zig Ziglar. He passed away now a couple years ago. But I'll tell you what, he was a gentleman who really revolutionized, I think, sales. And he began selling pots and pans door to door in Mississippi. Think about that for a moment. I mean, yeah, you read what he writes is still as valuable today when he wrote it 30, 40, 50 years ago.
I take a lot away from Zig Ziglar, just the way he speaks as well. I think it's really poetic. It's obviously there's a lot of work that goes into it, and it seems seamless, and there's probably tens of hours of work for every presentation or any video he ever did, if not more. But he's very poetic, and it's very paced, and it's very easy to listen to, and you're almost drawn in. And I find I guess it's charisma is probably the way you describe it, but I think that is underused in sales, and I think all the sales skills and everything can build on top of that.
Yeah, because he knows that it's about, he knows you have to sell yourself first. And if you fail to believe in yourself, there's no way you'll ever be successful in sales. I mean, he really firmly, integrity is the foundation of sales. And, yeah. So anyway, we could.
Well, we could probably do, and I might even do it in the future, actually, a show on Zig Ziglar. It seems like I could do a roundup of, because everyone has an opinion on him. In fact, this might be a new theme for a new show that we would do once a month or something, a wrap-up and a roundup of expert opinions like yours, Mark. I'll listen, keep tuned for that, Sales Nation. Something might develop from this conversation on that front. And final one, Mark, so I'm going to ask everyone that comes on the show, if you could go back in time and speak to your younger self, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give him to help him become better at selling?
Wow, I would take more risks. I would seriously take more risks. And combined with that, I would really build a bigger network. I failed to leverage as many mentors as I could and should. We all come into this world with the ego. We think we know what it is. And man, my ego got the best of me early on. If I had shut up and listened to more mentors, taken more risks along the way, you and I wouldn't be sitting here, but I'd be sitting in Warren Buffett's office. No. Sorry.
I appreciate that. And let me ask you that question again, almost verbatim of if you went back in time and spoke to your younger self, told him to take more risks, he took more risks. Do you think that it's still something that you'd go back and continually just tell yourself because there's always just room for growth there?
Yeah, because when we don't take enough risks. We look for the safety. We grow up as kids striving to just, what are we going to do Friday night? Then, we get into college and we may set this 5-year goal, but I don't think we really set 25-year goals. Do we really set 25-year goals? Do we really set the big, and do we really dream? Now we can dream, but do we execute big enough? And sometimes to execute, you got to take risks. And we don't, as a society, we've been programmed to not take risks because failing is a bad sign. No, fail fast, learn faster. That's what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
I want to fail fast.
I think it's even simpler than that, Mark. I think people are just a bit soft. I know for myself that every time I've talked about this on the show before, but this is the best example I've got of, I was really nervous about doing a video show. So I started off just doing the audio. You can obviously hide behind the audio a little bit better. I had the excuse of the audio downloads get, 10x more downloads than what the video do, because of course it's easier to consume this kind of content driving in your car or at the gym. And so I put off doing the video show for 6-8 months. If I'd have had all that content on YouTube now, we'd be 3 or 4 times the subscriber rate, we'd be way further down the line. And I think that's just such a simple little thing that was a no-brainer business-wise that I don't know what it was. Something just held me back. It was obviously my confidence of being on camera and having to not want to look stupid on camera as well. And that was just a tiny little risk that we probably go through day to day. And unless we take the time and the energy to look backward perspective, we don't realize all the risks that we're not taking. So it's not that we're perhaps proactively not taking enough and we're not focusing down and saying this. We're just missing opportunities because we're not open to them.
Think about what you just said with relationship to prospecting, because that's the whole thing. We're not willing to take enough risks when it comes to prospecting. This is the big argument that I'll say when people say, "Oh, I don't want to pick up the phone." Why? It's okay. You're never going to know unless you make that call. And we have to be more risk-oriented. The risk-oriented people are the ones who are driving the Porsches. We were talking earlier. Warren Buffett, believe me, he knows how to take risks because he puts risk in a completely different set of circumstance, or he defines it completely different than you and I define it. The only failure we have is the failure in ourselves to be willing to push ourselves to the next level.
Amazing. I appreciate that, Mark. And I mean it coming from you as well. And with that, I want you to tell us a little bit about high profit prospecting and where we can find it as well.
Well, hey, you can go online, order it at any online bookstore. It's going to be in bookstores available eventually come latter part of September. But high profit prospecting, you can go out to my website. You can click through there. But do pick up a copy of it, because just what we've been talking about here, I mean, we really run down, because if I don't get prospecting right, I'm not going to close at full price. The biggest reason salespeople offer discounts to close deals is because they've been chasing the wrong prospect. When I chase the right prospect, when I get the right prospect, when I put them through the right process, I can close them at full price.
Nice. And Mark, with that, tell us about your website as well, because there's a crap ton of content on there, which Sales Nation will find useful.
The website is The Sales Hunter. And yes, my name, Mark Hunter, that is my real name. I've had people ask me, did you change? No, my dad did well, okay? So anyway, it's thesaleshunter.com. And you can jump out to it, and there's a link that'll take you if you want to buy the book from there. But there's a ton of content out there. You're right. because I do. I want to, I hate it when people say they're not successful in sales. I cringe at that because my goal is to help everyone be successful. There's more opportunities in sales today than there ever has been before. I don't care what people sit there and say. I think there's more opportunities. It's just you have to be willing to ride a different horse than maybe you were willing to ride a year or two ago.
Amazing. With that, Mark, I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for your energy and your insights. I really appreciate that. And I want to thank you for joining us on the Salesman Podcast.
Great selling.
There we have it. Mark, thank you for coming on the show. Thanks for sharing your time, your expertise, mate. I appreciate it. Thank you, Sales Nation, as always, for tuning in. It means a lot that you've shared your attention with us, and hopefully you've got as much out of this episode as what I did as well. If you enjoyed this, click subscribe. If you like this one in particular, hit that thumbs up button, the weird one. I don't actually think it does anything on YouTube algorithm wise, but I'm going to tell you to click it anyway. And with that all said, I'll speak with you again on tomorrow's episode.